Well, we finally arrived at the fifth love language, which is physical touch. And we've talked about the other four. And really, you cannot have uh, a love relationship without touching one another. That's just part of being together as a couple. See there? Touch is very important. It's very important to me, especially when I was born 80 years ago in Miami, Florida. I was a premature, a little over 6 months baby. I weighed 3 pounds, 14 ounces. And the doctor told my mother, and my dad wasn't there because he was in the Navy. And my grandmother came down to stay with my mother, and he told them, this baby needs to have you to rub his arms and legs so his circulation will improve. So early on, my first few weeks of life, I was touched constantly by my mother and my grandmother. And I think that set me up really for my love language is physical touch. I understood that as a baby, and now all these years later, it's still very important to me.
And uh, and I have learned to touch him that way. But we've said before, we cannot. It's hard for us to distinguish between love language to say I've got this one and you've got that one, because I think as you have years together, you will learn to speak all languages, and they will mean. I don't know if they'll mean as much. I love to touch him now as much as, well, I don't know. Quality time is mine. So, but they all come together, I think, in a marriage, in a good marriage. And when uh, we were at a church once in the South, and our daughters were in their teenage years. So our youngest daughter had a friend, and they were 13 years old, and Penny would tell Cheryl lots of times when she came, she said, I love to come to your house. And Cheryl wanted to know why. And she said, I love to see your mother and daddy touch. They touch all the time. And she said, my parents never touch. And so on page 105 in your book, and I know you've already probably looked at the book, physical touch can make or break a relationship. So it broke that relationship. Penny's parents divorced just a couple of years later when she was in college. So who could imagine that seeing another friend's mom and dad touch would mean something? But it does. People just know when you share touches. And it's so automatic for us. It's just automatic. If I pass him sitting at his desk, and I might just touch him or squeeze him. We do that all day long. And so I remember once when we were walking down the streets in Vienna, and I reached, and I guess we had done it many times, but I reached and put my arm through his arm, and he said, you don't know how that makes me feel. I feel like a king. And that's just touching. So whether your spouse has a love language of physical touch or you do, I know you share it, but you have to know. And you have to know what love language each of you have. And we can talk about that in the next session. And you may have already, I think you've already known your languages from your spouses. But
Well, I certainly cannot conceive of a young couple, even when you're dating in your maybe late teens or early 20s, or even if you're dating in your 30s, that you could have a relationship without touching one another. That's just part of showing that you care about another person. And we just recently acquired two little kittens.
They're 4 months old.
they're going to be outside cats. We don't want them in the house. But right now they're in my shop, and I just came in a few minutes ago, and they were so affectionate. They wanted to rub on my legs, and they jump up on the table and wanted me to love on them. And I thought, even animals have to be touched, and they want to touch us. Now they do it on their terms. They're cats, they're not like a dog. But anyway, it just emphasizes the importance of touch in a relationship. Your turn.
Well, I started to say, as Tom shared about how he had to be touched when he was young because he was so he didn't have much weight on him, but they've done so many studies, and I know you nurses have heard of these studies where they treat babies. They have two groups, and they touch these babies and hold them and caress them, and they thrive and they do well. And the other group, I think it's terrible. This other group, they just take care of their basic needs, change them, feed them, nothing extra for a warm embrace or a touch. And some of those babies
actually
die. So, and marriages die, I think, without touch. And just as this one that we told you about of our daughter's friend, touch is vital, and Jesus taught us to touch. There are two passages, one in Mark 10, and that's expressed in this book, Mark 10, when the parents brought their children for Jesus to touch them. And the disciples said, "No, go away. He doesn't have time for this." And he said, "Do not rebuke these.
Let the children come to me.
So I can touch them."
And he touched them and blessed them. In other words, he said some positive things to those children. And I'm sure the parents had done the same thing. And they recognized that Jesus was a teacher, a rabbi. He was a person of importance in their life, and so his touch and his words of affirmation would go a long way in the development of their children, and they knew that. And I think we all understand how important, especially like for grandparents in a child's life, to give words of affirmation, tell those children how precious they are, and hold them and touch them. A child that doesn't have that is certainly at a disadvantage later on in life.
But children know when you touching each other. And when we were asked to do our first marriage seminar years ago, 20, 30 years ago, we asked our children, as we were going to prepare for the topics on this, what is the one thing
that they remembered most about life at home, because they were already adults at this point.
At that point. And so every one of them, they didn't confer. We asked each one of them separately or called them, and each one of them said, "You always touched. I will always remember that you and Dad just touched. You touched in the kitchen. You touched in the office. You touched lots of places." And and for your children, to me, that gives security in a family, for your children to know that, because touching, I think, speaks love, just as a quality time speaks love, and acts of service speaks love, and affirming words, but I don't know, touch may bring it all together.
I think children pick up on touch probably more than anything else. It's a need they have, obviously, and they see the parents touching one another. It conveys love to them and security, and they need that. And so that's what our children saw in our touching each other, affectionate, caring for one another. It just helps them relax in a home atmosphere.
So, and I have shown this book before on one of the things, His Needs, Her Needs, by Willard Harley, and it's an excellent book that goes on. It's
Really, it's almost, it tracks along the same idea that
love language.
5 love languages, yeah.
But William Harley says the number one need for most men, guess what? Tell us.
Sexual
Fulfillment.
yeah.
It's the number one need for men, and
The number one need for a woman is?
affection.
So how do those?
His affection.
Affection, and she wants affection, and he wants sexual.
Sex.
And sometimes her want for affection is just
Well,
a hug like
well,
this.
it's a cuddle time.
Yeah,
you know.
and she doesn't want sex.
But he thinks
And
if
he
he
thinks-
cuddles me, it's got to be.
And that's where it's going to end up. So you got to work through that. You got to come to understand that she needs me to hug her and just hold her and listen to her if she's crying or if she's happy, no matter what the situation might be. But that's as far as she wants to go with it
at that time.
at that time.
But I brought that up to say you can't have sex without touch, and so and that's a form of expressing your love.
Well, it's
with the love language.
a sub-language of physical touch. It's just part of it. But physical touch is not just sex. And some
Right.
guys can't figure that one out, and they think if we touch, then that's what it's ultimately going to lead to. And that's not always the case. So a smart man will understand that if his wife need is physical touch, or if that's how he expresses himself, then it doesn't always have to end up in the bedroom.
Right. But it does most of the time.
A lot of the time, yeah.
Early on, and you probably have not heard of this, Charlie Shedd, he did more, I think, in our early married years. And we've been married 61 years in March. So I read Charlie Shedd. I read a lot of his books. You can go online and look, and his books are still available. But he really talked a lot about sex in marriage, and it's very plain and good and wholesome how he wrote. But and then he wrote a book, Letters to Karen, which was his daughter, and Letters to Philip, which was his son, and he talked in those about marriage. But the first book I read about him, he talked about their relationship, he and his wife's, and evidently she didn't enjoy sex or didn't like sex, and he didn't know about the love languages, I guess, at this time, as far as it being said that way. So they evidently had some trouble. And do you know what she did? She went to a
Prostitute
house or whatever, and she learned from her. You just can't imagine, I guess. Nowadays we wouldn't think we have to do that, because there are so many books out there, that even Christian books, Christian authors that help in how to have a good.
She went to learn how to express herself in front of her husband,
And to be more initiative,
Yeah.
for her to be the initiator in lots of things,
Well,
because that's what he needed.
I think that's certainly commendable on her part, to be wise enough to realize that there's something wrong in our sexual relationship, and I need to go try to find out some answers. So anyway, that's very much a part of physical touch. And
Go ahead.
well, I don't know how much we want to go into the sexual relationship, but obviously it's very important. And probably if you took a survey, most men would say that that's, very important to them, and it's something that they expect out of marriage. And a lot of times, of course, nowadays in the culture, sexual relationships began before marriage. And we don't necessarily need to talk about that, but it is very much a part of the social scene today, and there are hookups between people on the internet. There are dating sites where you can find somebody, and the next thing you know, you're in bed together. So, sex drives a lot of our culture today, and it's certainly more acceptable as far as before marriage situation than it used to be. In fact, I would say that the culture now pretty much says do what you want to do when you want to do it and enjoy yourself, because that's what life's all about. And as a Christian, and Barb and I understand that sex is to be done in the context of marriage as God intended. So we've had a wonderful relationship sexually over 61 years since marriage. And before marriage, we did not have sex relations. We had physical touch, but we didn't go that far with it. So,
yes, a lot of couples, you have good physical touch before you marry. If you'll remember the story in this chapter about Pete and Patsy, Dr. Chapman tells about how he met them and how they shared their story. They were dating in college, spent every weekend together just about, and they didn't have any trouble touching, and hugging and kissing. That they just did. But after they got married and were settled, she didn't. Well, you can read the story of how they pulled apart.
He got busy with work, and she was a gourmet cook, so she thought the way to express her love for him was to make meals, and he
was that story?
Yeah, and he didn't want complex meals. He just wanted a simple. Well, anyway.
But they came to learn that his love language. They didn't know the word then, but that his love language, he needed more physical touch. And as they got married, and months go and weeks go, and some of you are young married, and you know the excitement of the touching and the hugging and all before marriage, and then you marry and you get busy and life happens, and
a lot of times, even when children come along, oftentimes the child takes the place for the mother. She's so affectionate with her children, and the husband feels abandoned and left out. And so those are hurdles you have to work through in a marriage relationship. Before you know it, there's another child and maybe another one, and life gets complicated, and it's hard for husbands and wives to find time together, even in the evening hours. The kids our kids used to call and they want a glass of water at 9-10 o'clock at night, and you tell them to go to sleep. And I remember having to go and you spend time with them trying to get them to sleep so you can get back to the bedroom. And sometimes by the time all that's over with, you're no longer in the mood. It's just, life can be complicated, and so it's something you have to work together on.
Right. And we've shared, even before when we started these, marriage is the most beautiful journey you'll ever take. But it takes a lot of work. We told you it's 100%. I give 100%. He gives 100, and so it's a learning experience, and I know some of the even the love languages to me overlap, and some of our videos may have overlapped. We may have told the same story, but it's just all such a part of marriage as you learn and as you give and share the communication. We talked about communication, and you cannot have good physical touch without communications, because what if he tries to touch me somewhere and I don't like that? I have to be able to tell him that, and vice versa. He has to tell me what he likes better. And anything is beautiful within your marriage and your touching, but you have to be able to share your likes and dislikes with each other and be free to say those, to have the freedom to do that. Anything else, sir, on physical touch?
No, well, obviously there's a lot to be said,
Yes.
but the books are helpful, and we encourage you to read. There's so much help now, even on the internet, but you have to be careful what you read, especially from a Christian perspective. Make sure that it's solid, has good biblical base and good advice, and marriage is, as Barb says, a wonderful experience together, and it's a combination of all those languages. We've learned to spend quality time together. We acts of service for one another. We're not real big on the gift things, although I make things for her all the time, and in my shop I enjoy doing that, and it's a gift of love to her, and they're all over the house here, and so.
I could show you.
But my primary language, love language, is physical touch. But I speak the other languages as well, and same with Barb. And I think her love language is quality time, and I don't always do the very best at that because I'm not too good at sitting still very long. I'm about run out of my time on this video.
So we just encourage you, when you hear this video, whether you have a weekend or a day off, just learn to touch each other in new ways. Try new ways of touch, but try them all the time. All right.
Okay.
God bless you.